A reading from the book of Wisdom. Who can know God's counsel, or who can conceive what the Lord intends? For the deliberations of mortals are timid, and unsure are our plans. For the corruptible body burdens the soul, and the earthen shelter weighs down the mind that has many concerns. And scarce do we guess the things on earth, and what is within our grasp we find with difficulty. But when things are in heaven, who can search them out? Or whoever knew your counsel, except you had given wisdom and sent your Holy Spirit from on high. And thus the paths of those on earth were made straight. The word of the Lord.
The second reading, a reading from the letter of St. Paul to Philemon. I, Paul, an old man, and now also a prisoner for Jesus Christ, urge you on behalf of my child Onesimus, whose father I have become in my imprisonment. I am sending him, that is, my own heart, back to you. I should have liked to retain him for myself, so that he might serve me on your behalf in my imprisonment for the gospel. But I did not want to do anything without your consent, so that the good you do might not be forced, but voluntary. Perhaps this is why he was away for you for a while, that you might have him back forever, no longer as a slave, but more than a slave, a brother, beloved especially to me, but even more so to you, as a man and in the Lord. So if you regard me as a partner, welcome him as you would me. The word of the Lord.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Great crowds were traveling with Jesus, and he turned and addressed them. If anyone comes to me without hating his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Which of you, wishing to construct a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost, to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers should laugh at him and say, "This one began to build, but did not have the resources to finish." Or what king, marching into battle, would not first sit down and decide whether with 10,000 troops he can successfully oppose another king, advancing upon him with 20,000 troops? But if not, while he is still far away, he will send a delegation to ask for peace terms. In the same way, any one of you who does not renounce all his possessions cannot be my disciple. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
What is the most important teaching of the Catholic faith? Just think for yourself for a moment. What do you think is the most important teaching of the Catholic faith? I want you to think about it for a moment. If what you came to is not something more or less, God so loved me that he died to take away my sins, you've missed the point. If what you reached in that moment was not, God loved me enough to die for me, to take away my sins, you've missed the point. It says elsewhere in Scriptures, there is no greater love than this, to lay down your life for your friends. There is no greater love than this, that God laid down his life for you. There is no greater love than this, that God said, you are worth me giving up my life. You're worth me giving everything for you. The image of the cross, the image of the crucified, at the time of Christ was seen as the most horrendous form of death. It was one of the most painful forms of death because it took hours for it to happen. It's sometimes a question that people will ask jokingly amongst friends, would you take a bullet for me? Would you take a bullet for me? You know, taking a bullet for someone, mostly you're talking about a quick death. That's easier to say yes to. Would you die a slow and painful death for me? Ouch, I'm not so sure. I kind of like you, not sure I like you that much. That's not what Christ says. When we look at the crucifix, when we look at the cross with Christ crucified upon it, we see the greatest expression of love. When the question is asked, would God die a slow and painful death for you? The answer is a resounding yes. He believes you are worth it. He says about you personally, I love you enough to give my life in a painful way for you. The question is, how do you love him? This gospel passage is one of the harder gospel passages for people to wrestle with. Many times we think of the gospel being a message all about love, and it is. But it's not an easy love. It's not the, I saw you and it just made my heart leap. I hope when we think of God, it does cause our heart to leap with joy. But will you go further than that? Will you take up your cross for Christ? A lot of times we like to look at the happier images of Christ. There's a smiling Jesus, there's a laughing Jesus, there's lots of happy images of Christ. But we're called many times to look at the cross of Jesus Christ and say, he did that for me. Am I willing to take up my cross for him? Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. What is your cross? What is it that is hard for you to do that you know God is calling you to? What is it hard for you to do that's going to get you humiliated, that's going to get you laughed at, that is going to be painful for you, that you know God is calling you to? There's an internet meme out there. I think it's quoting either C.S. Lewis or G.K. Chesterton. I can't remember which. I don't know if they even said it. It may be one of the ones they just threw their name on it anyways. But the truth is stated in this meme of, if your God never asks you to do something you don't want to do, you're not following God, you're following yourself. If your God never asks you to do something you don't want to do, you're not following God, you're following yourself. The Catholic Christian faith has long taken the crucifix as our image that we look at, not to beat ourselves up and say, I am so bad that God had to do this for me, but to see in the cross of Jesus Christ, this is how much God says I am worth. This is how much he loves me. How will you love him in return?